I am a careers advisor at Liverpool John Moores, and also a part-time PhD student. And this is my working title for my PhD, actually. What can be done to support autistic students to successfully enter employment when they graduate? So I'm studying, as it says here, at the University of Birmingham in the Autism Centre for Education and Research. So what I'd like to cover today, first of all, a short introduction, and then a little bit of context, and I have some facts and figures about autistic graduates and the destinations into employment and so on. And then I'd like to go into a bit about methodology, and then going on to my first cycle, what I've been doing so far, what I've been finding out, that's what I'm going to share today, and finally a summary. Now, my webcam has disappeared from my screen. I'm hoping, I mean, you don't really need to see me, but I'll assume that you can still see the slides if nothing else. Okay, so first of all, introduction. Here we go. I've already said that bit, so I'm going to move on to the next. So for a number of years, I'm a careers advisor at Liverpool John Moores University now, but actually I just moved there a year and a bit ago, and before that I was at Keele University, and it was there that I first developed a specialism in supporting disabled students. And I think through doing that, just realised how important the work is and how much what they struggle with when it comes to sort of understanding the workplace and accessing the workplace. As just mentioned, I am a co-chair on the AGCAS Disability Task Group. AGCAS is the professional body for careers advisors and careers practitioners in general in higher education, for those not in that sector. So as part of my role in the Disability Task Group, I actually co-author a report called What Happens Next, and that looks at the destinations of disabled graduates. And as I've been doing this for a number of years now, and what I've found year on year is that autistic graduates are the least likely to find employment and the most likely to be unemployed. And through writing this report, it just made me think something's got to be done about this. So I started at Keele University, and what I did was that there was a group of autistic students that met. So I suggested that we arrange some work placements for these autistic students. And it was fantastic. The results were fantastic. The employer involved was extremely supportive, and it was really interesting to sort of, I did some research around it to see the findings for those autistic individuals. They said it removed some of the mystery of the workplace, going to actually sort of being on placement. That they understood more about what was expected of them. They had more confidence as a result. And this was just such a positive experience. And I think with that backdrop of knowing what the statistics were nationally, I just thought, I want to do more about this. I want to find out more, which is what led me to start my PhD a couple of years ago, looking at, well, what can be done? If work placements help, are there other things that careers practitioners in universities can be doing to change this statistic for autistic graduates? So just a little bit more about the context. I think it's really important to note that, and it was first written about the Department for Business, Industry and Skills, said that actually universities have a key role, not only to educate their individuals, but to enable them to successfully progress to employment after graduation. And once I thought this, I thought, well, actually, what are universities doing to enable autistic students to successfully progress? And it's really variable, as I'll come on to in a minute. Now, Jonathan Vincent, who you have just heard from, actually sort of has noted this, and I think it's something that we do know, that the number of university students disclosing autism has increased really quite significantly over the last sort of 16, 17 years, so 400%. So there's more students disclosing autism, and but what we also know, and there's a whole range of articles here, including one by Jonathan Vincent and Mark Fabry, who are speaking today, who just note the poor employment outcomes for graduates with autism. And that concurs with what we've been finding in our AGCAS What Happens Next reports. Now, there have been a range of activities developed, and some of these are sort of in the US, in Australia, but also in this country. And these activities can range from some mentoring projects, supported work experience projects like the one I mentioned at Keele, also sort of tailored workshops that are specifically for autistic individuals. So things are being done, and I think increasingly so, which is encouraging. But the statistics are not changing. That's what we're finding. And also, there's not that much evidence about what works. So this is what made me think something needs to be done. Just to tell you a little bit more about the What Happens Next reports, and I'm going to show you a few figures. So this is the last one that's been published. It was 2019. And up until that point, they'd used what was called the DELI survey, the Destination of Leavers from Higher Education. So that was a survey done by universities and fed into HESA, the Higher Education Statistics Agency, 6 months after graduation. Now, this has been replaced now with something called the Graduate Outcomes Survey, also sort of commissioned by HESA. That actually, it sort of surveys graduates 15 months after graduation. So it's a slightly different survey. So we have to be careful when we compare it, but it's still providing a snapshot of what graduates are doing at some point after university. So the previous What Happens Next reports, as I mentioned, they found a year-on-year increase actually in general disclosure levels for disability, and that's at each qualification level. So undergraduates, postgraduates that are on taught courses, and postgraduate researchers too. But we find across the board that actually disabled students are less likely to be in employment and more likely to be unemployed. But most significantly for here, actually, we find that, as mentioned, those with autism are the least likely to be employed. They're also the most likely to be employed in a kind of precarious way on a 0 hours contract of all disabled groups. And actually, we've also found they're least likely to have chosen a role due to fitting in with career plans. So it's hard to know. You only get a kind of glimpse of what's going on here, but it suggests that either they had to take a job or perhaps there hasn't been a career plan as well. Both of which are a bit concerning. So it's frustrating. You'd like to know more about that, but unfortunately we can only surmise at this point. So this has actually not been published yet, what I'm sharing with you. We're currently writing the latest What Happens Next report. There was a delay. We normally publish in summer or the autumn at the latest, but there's been a delay to the graduate outcomes data being released by HESA. So we're still working on it, but we have the data. And I just want to show you here to explain. There are 2 columns here. The one on the left is for students with graduates with no known disability, and that's compared with the one on the right where there is a known disability. This is all disabled graduates together. Now, what you can see is that the blue part of the column represents full-time employment. So you can see there is a real difference, a notable difference for those with a disability. The yellow is part-time employment. So we can see there's real difference, but actually, you see even more notable this difference if you start looking at by disability type. Now, forgive me, there is quite a lot of information on this slide. So so just to explain, the column on the right shows no known disability, just for comparison, where the graduates hadn't disclosed, and the rest show different types of disability. Now, if I highlight here, this is the sort of facts for autistic graduates. And what you can see here is the blue representing still full-time employment, so the lowest levels of any disability group. Once you add part-time employment, it's still the lowest, but it's approaching some of the other sorts. But actually, what I also want to highlight is the red part of the column. That represents unemployment, and you can see that that is higher for this group. So this is the latest data. It is based on those students who graduated in 2018. So we're always a little bit behind. But it's just disappointing that even with a different survey, even over all this time when we know more is happening in universities and, with organisations like Ambitious About Autism, Employability and so on, working to support these graduates, it's still the same picture. So more needs to be done, is what I'd say. So just to kind of say very quickly a bit about my methodology for my study, I'm using, so for my whole PhD, I'm using an action research approach. This is where the practitioner and researcher, that we're in the centre, it's the same person as me, and you're in the centre of the research, and the aim is to improve practice. And I just thought this approach really suits me because I am a careers practitioner seeking to do something at my institution, and I'm also the researcher. So it's seeking to transform sort of understanding and practice as I do it. I'm using what's called an emancipatory paradigm, which means the way I'm looking at it is I want to do more than just look at things and improve my practice. I actually want to make it a freeing and transforming process for me, but also for the people that I'm seeking to help, which is the autistic students in this case. So I'm really wanting to make a difference. It's action research is critical practice, which is something described by Aristotle, actually. It's about acquiring knowledge of what is good and how to apply it. So that's what I'm really interested in. And many argue that the only way to do this is by having a participatory approach, which means that I actually involve the autistic individuals at all stages of my research. So with the planning of the research and the implementation of what I do, and then in the analysis of that, the review and the analysis as well. So just very quickly, this is my plan for my research. I'm going to talk to you about my findings from cycle 1, the reconnaissance phase, and that's kind of a really good idea to think what already exists, what good practice is that out there, and what is the problem. And then I'm using that to inform the next cycle, which I'm currently started at John Moores. That's looking at what can be put in place with the autistic students there. So I'm currently sort of recruiting students, and I've got a survey in place. I would then sort of report on that and reflect on that, and that would then, using what happens the rest of this academic year, I'll reflect on it, and then I'll think what could be done better next academic year. So that's the plan of where I'm up to. So what have I found? What is cycle 1, this reconnaissance phase, where I'm actually kind of finding what exists at the moment? Well, it consists of 2 elements, sort of which have been kind of going on concurrently. One is I interviewed 11 autistic graduates, they're recent graduates from a range of universities, and there were semi-structured interviews, and kind of by a variety of models, whatever sort of modes, whatever they wanted. So either by Zoom, by telephone, by email, face-to-face, and then also I interviewed, again, it was 11 careers practitioners from a range of UK universities, and in the various countries and types of university, and again, semi-structured interviews by telephone and Zoom. And I've analysed the findings of these. I'm actually in the process of this still, using Braun and Clark's 6 steps of thematic analysis as a way of trying to do it rigorously, to make sure I'm seeing, sort of seeing what's there. And this is where I'm up to so far, the emerging themes. So from the graduate consultants, that's the first element of this cycle, where I kind of interviewed the 11 autistic graduates, called them consultants, because I was asking them a series of questions about what would be helpful and what was their current experience as well. So first of all, one of the key themes was it's been about the mystery of the workplace, and this is echoing sort of, I know what people will be aware of, what Jonathan was saying as well, saying I don't understand jobs. Another person was saying it's the world of work seems very unimpenetrable. So there's lots of jargon which can be intimidating. There's a real disconnect between what people, so recruiters, might say and what they actually mean. And it's a kind of hard for autistic graduates to decipher that and to navigate that situation. Also, for those who were working or who had had experience of work, there was something about the real challenge of being different, thinking, where do I fit? One said, I'm bashing myself against the world. The idea that the black and white approach not always being well received, and there's not really understanding why. And also, sort of often it was unseen struggles. So people think they're coping, but actually on the inside, and again, this was something Jonathan mentioned, that idea it's exhausting to seem normal and to cope with a lot of the sensory challenges and other ways that, other issues, and also, sort of present as neurotypical almost, and that's exhaustion. There's a real issue of comorbidity of there being mental health issues alongside, as well as autism, and so depression, anxiety were mentioned many times, and actually that the work, or even thinking about work and planning for work, could make things worse. And when asked about, well, what helps, what would you like to have seen, or what was good in the sort of when you were at university in terms of career support, it was very much relational. So thinking about, well, I just want someone to talk to ask questions, to help me to decipher this mystery of the workplace. That option to have regular contact, to provide that support, and this having the same person's continuity as well. So moving on to the careers practitioners, thinking about, well, what were some of the emerging themes there? Well, one thing that came out very loud and clear was just actually how much a person-centered approach is needed, more than with any other. I mean, this is something we're trained in, but actually there need to be adaptive, because your autistic students are presenting in such different ways, had different needs, and so needed to be flexible in terms of time and approach and what they were planning. To be reflective, something didn't work, so thinking, okay, how could I do that differently? Asking the student, what could I have done differently here to make that better? It definitely involves more time and energy and effort than usual, was something else that came across. Another thing is learning to see success differently. So whereas the universities generally feel often keen to have what's seen as a positive outcome is a graduate level full-time job, but actually that maybe that's not something that autistic student might want. So about seeing that actually a part-time job or voluntary work in the first instance could be real success for that individual as well. There was another key finding so far has been the impact on careers practitioners. It's actually I've heard it described as the double empathy issue, which I think is certainly described by Damien Milton speaking later. This idea that actually careers practitioners are really struggling to understand the autistic students, partly because of non-verbal. There aren't the sort of non-verbal cues like nodding and smiling that you might get from other students. So not really knowing if something's working or going well, and that kind of, and also finding that usual techniques, so probing questions sometimes might make people more stressed if they're autistic, and pauses sometimes weren't working, things that we're trained in not working, and all of this leading to self-doubt and worry, and phrases like, I felt like a moron, I thought I'd failed. So really quite strong statements around this. So really requiring resilience to carry on. Not surprisingly, so this collaboration with disability support or inclusion support services is really key with promoting programs and also finding that sort of like co-delivery is the most effective. But there are real challenges. So the people I spoke to are really eager to do something to support autistic students, but there's a lack of resources, both time and money. There are challenges that when things are set up for autistic students, they don't often read their emails or attend events. So it's thinking what will work, and also systemic issues. So thinking about things like actually many careers practitioners don't have access to contact details or even numbers or how many autistic people are there in our university. So issues like that, and the idea that it's not geared up for tailored support. So just to summarise in the last 30 seconds before lunchtime, I'm feeling in my position as a careers advisor and also someone who's keen to do research, that action research makes sense with me at the middle. What I'm doing now, based on my findings from the first stage, is embarking on cycle 2 at John Moores, where there hasn't been any sort of tailored support for autistic students before. So I'm very excited about putting something in place. But it is a challenge because whilst working and trying to put something in place in a university where it hasn't happened before, whilst also finishing my analysis of cycle 1 is keeping me busy. I think there are real issues with bringing about change in higher education. That is what I'm finding. That was what was fed back from the careers practitioners, and I think this forms one of the barriers. There's a real willingness to do something, but actually the issues around GDPR and the systems not being geared up, they're not being allocated resources. There are real challenges. But this is all just to help me and really made me determined to kind of keep going, because I know it's important. And when you see those statistics every year with the What Happens Next reports, it just makes you think something needs to be done. So I'm going to keep battling, and it's really great to be in a forum like this where there are so many others who are concerned about bringing about change as well. Thanks very much.